So today we are going to talk about the glorious topic known as expansion. And expansion has definitely been one of the hottest topics to talk about around MLS in these past couple of years, and that it feels like it's an annual tradition that there's always tends to be one expansion team coming into MLS every single season. Of course, this upcoming season we're going to have Austin FC coming into the league. The following year we're going to have Charlotte FC coming into the league, and even following that we're going to have Sacramento and St. Louis coming into the league. Now, I know Don Gabbert have said before that he wants to temporarily stop the expansion at 30 teams, but most likely that's not going to happen, and that I won't be surprised maybe later on this year or even heading into next offseason, we're going to once again have expansion talk about who exactly is going to be the 31st and 32nd team, and that there has been talks that eventually the league is going to go to 40 teams, and I generally believe that, of course, is going to be the case. It could potentially happen in the next 5 to 10 years, and that once we do get to 40 teams, that's when we also have to have another discussion about this whole growth that's going on in MLS. That, of course, is what's going to happen with the structure of the league. Is the league still going to be going with a conference system where there's going to be like 20 teams in each conference, or we're going to go with division, and that's where the talk gets even more complicated than that. But obviously, we're not going to kind of touch those kind of subject first, but instead talk about what I'm going to mention today, which is expansion. And I am actually going to decide to kind of do a power rankings in terms of looking at these 10 expansion cities. And this power rankings is kind of going to look at who exactly is most likely going to be the next team that is coming into MLS. In other words, who exactly is going to be that 31st MLS team. Number 10 being probably they're not going to be the 31st MLS team, but maybe they could be an MLS team in the foreseeable future. And then at number 1, that is probably the cities that is going to be awarded an MLS franchise next, and indeed they are going to be the 31st MLS team, and I won't be surprised. It's just going to be a matter of time when Don Gabbert has officially announced that this city is going to be awarded the 31st MLS team. So we start off at number 10, and at number 10 is going to be New Mexico. So I remember back in 2019 when the USL decided to award New Mexico a franchise that is New Mexico United. There was definitely a lot of hype surround this team, and that not only the fact that this team exceed expectation of what they were expecting the fan support is going to be, but they end up leading the league that inaugural season in terms of attendance, and pretty much every single game at Isidro Park where they play was a sellout. And their incredible fan support even included in that U.S. Open Cup run that they had in their inaugural year, where, remember, they went all the way to the quarterfinal, and that I think the most memorable part of that run was when they play against the Colorado Rapids, where I believe half of the stadium during that game was actually New Mexico United fans, and you rarely see that strong of a support from a second division side and support them in an away game that you will ever see. And granted, yes, it was the U.S. Open Cup, and yes, when USL team play against MLS team, certainly there's going to be some hardcore fans that support the USL side are going to be willing to travel to see their team to play against these giants of an MLS team, but definitely not as much as I thought New Mexico United fans kind of made their support, and that there was around maybe 1,000 or 2,000 people that actually traveled to Denver and traveled to Colorado to watch their team play against the Rapids, and then of course win that game. And then the following round when they play against Minnesota, yes, they got battered that one by the Loons, but I think with how New Mexico United fans traveled to Allianz Field, I think that was the most away fans I have ever seen any away team that bring their supporters to Allianz Field. Probably even more than the following round when Loons were playing against the Portland Timbers. I mean, this is pretty much as an evidence of how strong this fan base is. And whenever you have a strong fan base, there's definitely going to be talks about maybe they could have a shot to be awarded an MLS team. Well, here's the problem. There hasn't been any reports that of course, is the case. And in fact, out of all these 10 cities I named, I think New Mexico is going to be the only city, or in this case, the only state that I'm going to mention where I have heard nothing about how they can potentially get an MLS team, and a lot part of that is due to the fact that if MLS is going to award New Mexico a franchise, it is going to be one of the smallest, if not the smallest market in the league, and maybe even in all of the professional league here in the U.S. Well, actually, technically, that's not true because I don't want to this call that the Green Bay Packers will always forever remain the smallest market in terms of all the professional league in the U.S. But New Mexico is going to be pretty close to that, and especially with how MLS, in terms of their expansion strategy, they tends to always go to these big market teams that don't have an MLS franchise, and they want to award them so that they can of course get not only new fans to support the team, but also get the revenue from those big market kind of city that will award a expansion team. Well, unfortunately, New Mexico is not a big market, and that New Mexico United, the city that they play in, that is Albuquerque, is actually one of the poorest city in the U.S. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of rich owner that's going to be coming out of that state that is going to have enough money to maybe really consider these MLS officials to pretty much bring a team to New Mexico. But you never know. Maybe in the future, if the support is going to continue to be very strong, and maybe if Albuquerque is going to start to become kind of a growing city, which that of course is not the case right now, maybe in the future New Mexico is going to get a team. Now, at number 9, I am going to say Louisville. Now, Louisville, like New Mexico United, their team also has a very strong report, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Louisville is kind of what you say the Seattle Sounders of the USL. Like, this team is pretty much for the past couple of years the most dedicated team in the USL, and that they have pretty much reached USL Cup every single year and have won a couple of USL Cup, and they also probably have the best looking stadium in the USL after they just recently opened that brand new stadium, which looks nothing like a USL level kind of stadium. It looked almost like an MLS level of a stadium. Now, that being said, the reason why I still rank Louisville pretty low on this list is that despite the fact that the cities did say that they're tempted to try to lure an MLS franchise to Louisville, their ownership basically are saying no, and that they want to stay in USL. And I guess the reason why they want to do that is that since they're already so successful in USL, why do you want to leave this league and trying to move to MLS? And that in some way they also kind of saw what happened to FC Cincinnati, where remember how FC Cincinnati was relatively successful in USL before they moved to MLS, and look how that of course went out. Obviously, this Louisville ownership saw that, and they don't want to make the same mistake, and they're kind of complacent and to stay in USL and continue to kind of dominate the second division of U.S. soccer. But in case of that ownership is starting to kind of feel like maybe it's time to bring an MLS franchise to the team, or if their fans do want to kind of push the ownership and kind of maybe put some pressure on the ownership that they deserve their team to go into MLS, or maybe even get an MLS franchise, then I could definitely see a case that Louisville could potentially get an MLS franchise. Now, just like New Mexico, Louisville is going to be one, if not the smallest market, if they indeed do get an MLS franchise. And as I said before, MLS, in terms of how the expansion has been in the past couple of years, has always tends to look for big market or teams that definitely have wealthy owners that can definitely help maximize the revenue of the team. Louisville does have that kind of ownership, but they do kind of lack in terms of that big market kind of environment that MLS does look in terms of expanding some of these teams in some of these cities. Now, at number 8, it is going to be Raleigh. Now, Raleigh, I remember a couple of years ago, used to be right up there near the top 5 in terms of the team that is potentially going to get an MLS franchise, and that the reason why they kind of dropped down the ranking and really kind of had their chances of potentially getting an MLS team killed was because of Charlotte coming into the league. Like, people kind of forget that when Charlotte did kind of come into the league, people who kind of forget that this is actually something that I'm pretty sure the Raleigh group, which is named North Carolina FC, were not happy when they saw this, because both of these group are actually really completely different, and that this isn't like a situation where both the Raleigh group and also the Charlotte group are kind of come together, and that they hope that eventually MLS will award a franchise in either of their city and award a franchise in North Carolina. No, that wasn't exactly how it works. It was kind of like both group kind of fighting to see who exactly is going to get that MLS franchise in their cities, and unfortunately Charlotte was able to win that bid, and basically that left out Raleigh chance to potentially get an MLS franchise. And that, with the way how I don't think there's going to be a chance that MLS is going to put two North Carolina team in the league, yeah, the Raleigh bid is definitely kind of dead right now. But you never know. Maybe once again they're going to push hard and maybe convince Don Gabbert that indeed maybe there is a chance that Raleigh does get a team in the near future. But I really think that Charlotte bid really kind of killed their aspiration of potentially getting an MLS franchise. Now, at number 7, it is going to be Detroit. Now, Detroit, I remember a couple of years ago when there was like kind of a top 4 candidate in terms of the two expansion spot that these cities of course were able to be awarded. Detroit, of course, was one of those 4 cities. Now, unfortunately, Detroit was probably the least likely cities that was going to get one of those 2 spots a couple of years ago, because the big issue with Detroit is the stadium, and it seems like right now MLS is trying to enforce this rule where if you're going to come to MLS, if you're going to have a franchise in your city, you need to build a soccer-specific stadium. Now, to some extent, that kind of statement is kind of a little bit misleading, because we just saw what happened with Charlotte, and how they didn't really kind of follow that statement, where once they do get a new franchise, they have to build themselves a soccer-specific stadium instead of playing in their share NFL stadium with the Carolina Panthers. But obviously, I guess maybe the reason why MLS decided to do so is because maybe Charlotte had gave MLS a ton of money in terms of the expansion fee, and they were able to get the team, despite the fact that they did not follow that kind of statement where every single expansion team need to have a soccer specific stadium. And in some way Detroit can potentially do so, but at the same time I feel like when you look at how MLS have said that they don't want a MLS franchise that's going to be playing in Fort Field, something tells me that Detroit will really need to build themselves their own soccer specific stadium. And I have heard multiple times where city's official from Detroit refused to potentially build a soccer specific stadium for Detroit, which kind of really dampers the chance of Detroit getting a franchise. And then there's also that interesting situation where Detroit only professional soccer team, Detroit City, which is one of the team that I really want to ground hop, and one of the most famous non-league team, and one of the most well-known non-league team here in the U.S., have openly said that they do not want to have an MLS franchise in Detroit, and they especially don't want their team to potentially move away from the NPSL and go into MLS. So there's kind of a conflict in terms of the fan culture there too, but mostly the reason why Detroit probably is not going to get an MLS franchise is because they cannot get that soccer specific stadium that they want to build, get it done, even if they have a relatively wealthy owners that looking to try to pursue their way into MLS. Now, at number 6, it is going to be Tampa Bay. Now, Tampa is an interesting situation, and in some way, Tampa is kind of in a bit of a difficult situation where when you look at most of the rankings in terms of who exactly is going to be the team that's going to be awarded an MLS franchise, you always found Tampa right in the middle. And that Tampa always kind of is a city where people think, well, it's not the worst cities to potentially going to get an MLS franchise, but it's definitely not the best, and there's always going to be cities that ahead of them that in the rankings that definitely is going to get in before for them. But I think maybe one of the biggest reason why Tampa does still belong themselves lower in this ranking is the stadium situation. And just like Detroit, they're having a lot of issue in terms of approving the stadium, and that unless they are going to find a way to finally approve a stadium that is going to be ready to build once they are going to be awarded a franchise, Tampa unfortunately is going pretty much going nowhere in terms of awarding an MLS franchise, which is kind of a shame because I really feel like Tampa should get another shot in terms of getting an MLS franchise. I remember back in the late 1990s when Tampa was awarded an MLS franchise, that is the Tampa Bay Mutinies. Yeah, that team, while that team was kind of successful in their short span of their history, attendance was a big issue. But that was because they were playing in an aging old Tampa stadium, which was even back then considered probably the worst stadium in MLS, and this was back when a lot of MLS team was playing an aging NFL kind of venue. So if Tampa, as I said, if they can get that funding of a new stadium and then and a soccer specific stadium, then I have a feeling maybe there's a chance that they can jump up in the rankings, and maybe MLS is willing to give them a franchise and kind of do what they did with Miami, where they were able to give them a second chance in terms of coming into MLS. Well, that being said, they also really hope that, like Miami, maybe they can get a big name celebrity in their ownership, or even get a billion-dollar owner to really kind of push the bids and potentially bring MLS back to Tampa Bay. Now, at number 5, I am going to say San Antonio. Now, just like what I said about Raleigh in this number 8 bit, San Antonio is another bit that has been really killed it because of what just happened a couple of years ago when Austin was awarded the bid, and that this was really a big slap in the face for San Antonio that's been really chasing a MLS franchise to be in their city for a while. In fact, San Antonio, this city, when you look at expansion, they seems to always be in the discussion in terms of every professional league here in the U.S. except for the NBA, which they currently do have a team there. And then it's no surprise that San Antonio has been wanted to get more than just the one professional franchise that they have right now, because this is definitely one of the biggest, if not the biggest city to only have one sports franchise right now in the U.S. And that, as I mentioned about how San Antonio's been chasing an MLS franchise for a very long time, I mean, that's also the reason why I put them a little bit higher compared to Raleigh, because I'm thinking that MLS is eventually going to award them a franchise and finally acknowledge the hard work that they had in terms of pursuing a MLS franchise. But at the same time, I still had to put them pretty low because of the Austin bid, and that I'm not quite sure if MLS is willing to try to bring their team in Texas. I know when Austin basically came into the league, there was definitely criticism in terms of the fact that not only Austin does not have a professional team in their history before Austin FC came, but Texas team has always had issue in terms of attendance, and that when you look at teams like Dallas and Houston and how they also been right near the bottom in terms of attendance figure years after year, a lot of people can say that there's really no need to add more Texas team when it's pretty clear that Texans don't really kind of care about soccer or support for their local MLS team as much as what MLS thought that was going to be the case. But you never know. Maybe MLS is going to be thinking about bringing a fourth team in Texas, and Texas is a big state with a lot of people there. So maybe that is kind of the reason why there might be another MLS franchise. And also, let's not to mention that San Antonio is also one of the bigger market, and probably one of the market that a lot of leagues have been trying to target it and think that if they are going to award a expansion franchise there, they can definitely maximize some more revenue into their league. Now at number 4, it is going to be San Diego. Now I'm going to kind of say the same argument I'll say with San Antonio of why San Diego maybe are not able to get an MLS franchise, and that of course is because people don't want 5 California team in MLS. Although the difference between this argument of what I said about San Antonio, where people don't want four Texas team in MLS, is that I feel like it's, if you look at both of these arguments, I would think that it's better to have five MLS team in California compared to just 4 MLS team in Texas. Mainly because unlike in Texas, in California, yeah, this is a very heavy soccer culture state, and there's a lot of people that of course who are willing to support their team. I mean, you just look at the free MLS team right now in California. LAFC, LA Galaxy, and the San Jose Earthquakes have always been near the top of the chart in terms of attendance figure. And also, when Sacramento does come into the league in a couple of years, I'm assuming they're pretty much going to sell every single game that they had. And that no, California, just like Texas, has a very big population. It is the most popular state in the country, and that San Diego is also a city that is kind of a big market city. And in some ways, I think San Diego, what they're also hoping being for MLS to award their franchise is kind of similar reason to why MLS decided to award a franchise to St. Louis. When St. Louis was bidding for an MLS franchise, they basically were saying that, well, we just recently lost our NFL franchise, the St. Louis Rams, to LA, and now we want to bring an expansion franchise so that we can add one more professional team in our cities. And this is going to be the same case with San Diego, where unfortunately they also lost their NFL team, that is the San Diego Chargers, to LA, and that they also want to have another professional team to kind of replace the one that they of course recently lost. Now unfortunately for St. Louis, they were relatively successful for that, and that's the reason why they kind of now got a team coming into the league in just a couple of years. That has of course not been the case as of yet in San Diego, but maybe the league can potentially look at that, and maybe eventually they are going to award San Diego a team. And that, I think the other thing that maybe could boost their San Diego chance of getting a team is to finally figure out the stadium situation, where they're kind of having also a little trouble in terms of securing themselves a soccer specific stadium and ready to kind of build it once MLS does award them an MLS franchise. But once they of course gets that done, I think most likely MLS is going to really look at San Diego and really look at as a cities that they can definitely support an MLS franchise and award them a team there. Now at number 3, I am going to say Indianapolis. So Indianapolis is another cities that I think a couple of years ago was kind of in the top 4 list in terms of these 4 cities that is fighting for 2 expansion spots, but unfortunately Indianapolis kind of lose out. But Indianapolis, they are really hot on this list, mainly because this has been a cities that kind of pretty much checked off all the lists of what MLS are looking for to try to expand a team to their cities. Do they have strong ownership? Yes, they do. Do they have a stadium that is ready to build? Yep, they have that exactly. Do they have the fan support to support the team? Oh yeah. Indy 11 is one of the most supported team in USL, and they're leading around they're in the top 5 list in terms of USL attendance for the past couple of seasons. So yeah, I think it's going to be a matter of time that MLS is eventually going to give a franchise that is going to be in Indianapolis, but we shall see whether or not if that is going to be the case, especially the fact that whether or not if MLS is going to be thinking about adding another Midwest team, which I think most likely they will, because knowing when you look at how these expansion would work, and that when you look at these expansion cities, and that how MLS want to make sure that with every expansion team, they want to make sure that there's always going to be like one expansion team that's coming out of the West, and then the very next expansion team have to come out of the East, because if they decided to push expansion and give all the Western team their priority to come into the league, then there would be just way too many team that's going to be in the Western Conference, and it kind of create an imbalance kind of schedule in terms of that. So yeah, maybe that is going to be also the other advantage of Indianapolis, where, you know, knowing the fact that I've heard in terms of expansion, where there seems to be a lot of Western cities that is vying for a spot of expansion, and knowing that MLS probably will only award like one or two of them spot, because they need to of course have to award a team in the East Coast a spot, so that they can of course balance the conference wise. That of course gives the advantage that Indianapolis could be that team that is going to be going in the Eastern Conference as an expansion team. Now at number 2, I am going to say Las Vegas. And speaking of course about how that, I mentioned about what I've just said about how, you know, if San Diego does come into the league, most likely then Las Vegas might have to wait a little bit, because of the fact that they don't want to have like two Western team coming into the league at the same time, and only have like one Eastern team, that is Indianapolis. And as I'm going to also mention at number 1, it is actually also going to be a Western team, which can definitely create a bit of a problem for teams like San Diego and Las Vegas to potentially come into the league with MLS. Don't want to push too many Western team to be in the league, so that it creates a little bit of an imbalanced conference. But obviously Las Vegas, the reason why they're at number 2 and are one of the most likely team, is that MLS has been saying many times that they want to eventually have a franchise in Las Vegas, and that in some way they kind of saw what happened with the NHL decided to expand the Vegas Golden Knights a couple of years ago, and how it was relatively successful. And then recently when the NFL decided to relocate the Oakland Raiders to the Vegas Raider, and although it hasn't really kind of shown how successful it is, because with the pandemic going on right now, and since there's no fans were able to attend the game, we couldn't really quite tell whether or not it has been a relatively success. But I'm assuming most likely it's going to be the case, and that seems like MLS want to kind of get into that action a little bit, where, you know, Vegas is a prime destination where they can of course able to get a franchise there, and then they can also make a ton of money, and definitely can help maximize the revenue of their league. And the other thing that definitely is a case where Vegas could get a team is that they also have some good fan support. You know, the USL team, the Las Vegas Lights, has also drawn some very good crowd throughout their first couple of years in USL. And let's also not to mention the League Cup final a couple of years ago was in Las Vegas. And the whole reason why the League Cup final was in Vegas is because the league eventually wanted to expand a team there, and that this was kind of an experiment to see whether or not if Las Vegas can definitely support a team. And yeah, I think they pretty much passed that test with the way that the League Cup final a couple of years ago was sold out. And granted, it was between two Liga MX team. You can also, you can basically say that even if that is the case, at least it seems like there are people in Vegas that are willing to of course support a local team, and actually should do love to watch soccer, and willing to of course support their team. But obviously the big reason why MLS wants to go into Las Vegas has a lot to do with the money wise, and that of all these markets that they've been wanted to really expand, in a market that they know for sure is going to help them get some revenue, it's got to be Las Vegas out of all of those cities. But finally, at number 1, I am going to say it's going to be Phoenix. And, you know, this video actually has been a little bit long, so I'm going to try to keep it a little bit short in terms of talk about why I think Phoenix is most likely the next city that is going to get an expansion team, and most likely Phoenix is going to award as the 31st franchise. Well, it's mainly because, like Indianapolis, they have pretty much everything checked it out on the checklist of what MLS is looking for its cities to have if you want to be awarded an MLS franchise. Do they have a strong ownership? Oh yeah, you know, the group from the Phoenix Rising, which is led by Didier Drogba, and in fact that group have already spoken to MLS and bunch of the MLS official multiple times of getting a team in Phoenix, just to show how close that it is that MLS eventually is going to expand it to Phoenix. Do they have the stadium to do it? Yep, they have a stadium ready to be built once an MLS franchise eventually come to the city. And then the most important thing is there going to be enough fan support to support this Phoenix team? Oh yeah, definitely. Phoenix, especially their team, the Phoenix Rising in the USL, even though they haven't really been leading the chart in terms of attendance wise, every single game that I've heard that the Phoenix Rising have played has been a sellout. I mean, they pretty much average 6,300 fans, which is kind of the capacity there. And they have also recently looking to try to build another stadium to kind of make it even a little bit bigger, so that they can of course improve their attendance wise, and maybe even get themselves into the top 10 or even the top 5 list in terms of the USL attendance, and continue to prove why Phoenix can definitely support a team. So yeah, with all that elements being there, it is no surprise that I think Phoenix is most likely going to be the next city that's going to be getting an expansion team, and that I really think it's just going to be a matter of time where we're going to finally hear the league has officially announced that Phoenix is going to be the next city to have an MLS team. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for this video. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video, and if there's any cities that is on this list that I think I might have ranked a little bit too low, or maybe ranked a little bit too high, let me know in the comments below. And also, if there's any expansion cities that I didn't mention that is on this board that you want me to kind of talk about, let me know in the comment section below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.